I wasn't supposed to be there. Not in that house, not in that town, and definitely not in that situation. But life has a weird way of forcing you into places you didn't plan on, especially when your world decides to fall apart all at once. It started with the breakup. I won't bore you with the details, but let's just say my boyfriend of 2 years dumped me via text. Not even a long one, just a lazy, almost clinical message that read more like a weather update than the end of something real. That same week, my job laid me off, downsizing, they said. And then, just to really drive it home, my lease ended, and my landlord decided to give my apartment to her nephew instead. So yeah, that's how I ended up standing on the porch of a house I hadn't seen since I was 17. The house belonged to Logan's family. Logan was my best friend growing up. He was the one who used to sneak out of his window at midnight to meet me under the old oak tree in his backyard. We'd talk about girls back then, or at least he did. I mostly just nodded along, pretending I cared, while trying to keep my own secrets buried. We hadn't spoken in years. We drifted apart after high school. Different colleges, different circles. I figured he'd forgotten about me, or at the very least, moved on. But his mom hadn't. She still liked all my Facebook posts and sent me birthday texts every year, so when I had no one else to call, I messaged her. She replied immediately, "Of course, sweetheart. Come stay as long as you need. Logan's home too. It'll be like old times." Yeah, except it wouldn't. When the door opened, I expected her. Warm smile, tight hug, maybe something in the oven. But it wasn't her. It was Logan. And holy shit. He stood there like something out of a cologne ad. Black t-shirt, sweatpants low on his hips, hair messy in a way that looked intentional. He had always been cute, but now he looked different. Older, sharper, broad shoulders, stubbled jaw, eyes that used to be full of mischief, now dark and unreadable. "Dude," he said, and his voice had dropped an octave since I last heard it. "Is that really you?" I nodded, trying to keep my cool. "Yeah. Hey." He stepped forward and hugged me. A real hug. Tight, warm, arms around my back like we hadn't gone 5 years without speaking. When he pulled back, his eyes lingered on mine just a second too long. Or maybe I imagined that. I'd been imagining a lot of things lately. "Come in," he said, grabbing my bag without asking. "You look tired." I stepped inside, the scent of lemon cleaner and laundry hitting me like a memory. The house was exactly the same. Same crooked picture frames, same scratch on the hallway floor from where Logan used to slide into home plate with his socks on. His mom came downstairs a few minutes later, apron on, flour on her hands. She hugged me tight and immediately started fussing about making me dinner. Then she left for errands, promising pie and hugs when she got back. And just like that, it was me and Logan again. We stood in the kitchen, him leaning against the counter, me nursing a cup of coffee I didn't really want. "So," he said, like no time had passed, "what happened?" I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" He gave me a look. "You don't text my mom out of nowhere unless something big happened. Come on." I hesitated. "Breakup, job stuff, got kicked out. Kind of a trifecta." He winced, then set down his mug. "Shit, that sucks." I nodded. "Yeah." He didn't say anything for a minute, just looked at me, not in a pitying way. Just like he was trying to remember the version of me he used to know. Then he lifted his mug again, clinked it against mine. "To shitty timing," he said. "To starting over," I replied. And just like that, I felt the first flicker of peace I'd had in weeks. But it wouldn't last. Because Logan wasn't the same guy the first used to know. And as I'd find out soon enough, neither was I. I figured we'd go back to being surface-level polite, like old classmates awkwardly reconnecting after too much time apart. But Logan wasn't like that. He never had been. By the end of the first day, he was dragging me into his room like no time had passed. His space was different now. No more posters of metal bands or half-deflated soccer balls. Just a clean desk, a massive TV, and a weight bench shoved in the corner. "Mom turned your old room into some weird sewing/storage thing," he said. "So I figured you can crash in here. I've got the futon." I looked at him. "You sure?" He shrugged like it was nothing. "Yeah, I'm not gonna let you sleep next to a plastic tub full of yarn and Christmas lights." The futon was surprisingly comfortable. We stayed up that night, half watching a movie and catching up in pieces. He told me he was back home for a few months, working remotely while finishing up his PT certification. Said he'd been living in Denver but got tired of the city. "And the dating scene," he added, eyes on the screen. "That was exhausting." I tried to keep my voice casual. "Oh yeah. Everyone's either looking for marriage in 6 months or some weird open relationship where you never meet their other partners. I don't know, none of it felt real." I didn't ask if he was seeing anyone now. I didn't have the right to ask. We barely knew each other anymore. Still, I caught myself watching him. I told myself it was just the lighting, or the way his arm flexed when he reached for the remote. I told myself I was tired, emotional, that I wasn't reading into anything. But then came the next morning. I woke up to sunlight and the quiet creak of floorboards. Logan was already up, shirtless, hair wet from a shower. He stood by the mirror, messing with a contact lens, completely unaware of me sitting up behind him. His back was broader than I remembered, toned in a way that made my stomach twist. "Morning," he said when he noticed me. "Sorry, didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't," I lied. He stretched his arms over his head, yawning. His sweatpants hung low on his hips. He was clearly comfortable. Too comfortable. "I forgot how hard that futon is," I muttered, trying to look anywhere but directly at him. He laughed. "Yeah, you get used to it. I can bring in a mattress topper if it helps." I waved it off. "Nah, I'll survive." We had breakfast on the porch. Coffee, eggs, toast. The sun warmed the deck, and for a moment, everything felt fine. Easy. But then, as I reached for my mug, our hands brushed. It was nothing. A second, but he didn't pull away right away. And I swear, I felt his fingers press lightly against mine before he let go. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, just tired." He looked at me for a beat longer than necessary, like he knew I wasn't being honest. Then he nodded and stood, stretching again before heading inside to change. I stayed behind, staring out at the yard, my mind racing. This was supposed to be temporary, a safe place to land until I figured out my next move. But now I was lying to myself about how I felt, about how being near Logan stirred up something I hadn't expected, something I wasn't sure I wanted to deal with. That night, it happened again. Another movie, another few drinks, this time on the couch. And sometime around midnight, I woke up with my head leaning against his shoulder. His arm was still around me. I should have moved. I should have sat up, cracked a joke, made it normal. But I didn't. Because the truth was, I didn't want to move. And he didn't either. I lay there, still pretending to be half asleep. Even though my heart was pounding so loud I was sure he could feel it through the fabric of his hoodie. His arm was draped loosely over my shoulder. Casual, but not careless. It wasn't a we fell asleep on the couch watching a movie kind of position. No, this felt intentional, meant, and Logan didn't move. He just sat there, breathing slowly, like he was waiting to see what I'd do. I didn't do anything. I couldn't. My body felt like it was holding its breath along with my brain. Eventually, he shifted slightly, not away from me, closer. His hand, which had been resting innocently along the side of the couch cushion, moved. Just an inch. And then another. Then it was resting on my forearm, and then his fingers gently curled around it. Still, I said nothing. Maybe I was scared he'd pull away if I did. Eventually, he spoke. "You ever think about how weird this is?" I turned my head slightly, just enough to glance up at him. "What do you mean?" "This. Us. I haven't seen you in years, and now it's like, I don't know, like we didn't miss a beat." I sat up slowly, the movement separating us just enough to kill the moment. His arm dropped back to his side, but he didn't look upset. If anything, he looked relieved, like someone had finally cracked the tension in the room. "Yeah," I said, rubbing my face. "I was kind of thinking the same thing." Logan looked down at the empty beer bottle in his hand, twisting it slowly. "It's not just that, though," he said. I don't know how to explain it. I feel different around you." That sentence hung in the air. I didn't know what to do with it. He looked at me. Not in a nervous way, just openly, like he was finally ready to say something out loud. "I've been thinking about stuff lately," he said. "Things I ignored back then." I swallowed hard. "Logan." "I'm not saying anything." He cut in, a slight smile playing on his lips. "I'm just saying, I've been thinking." He didn't elaborate, just gave me that same half smirk he used to wear when he knew he was saying too much but couldn't help himself. We said goodnight not long after, but I barely slept. I just lay there in the dark, listening to the faint sound of Logan brushing his teeth in the bathroom, his bare feet padding against the old wood floors, the creak of his bed when he finally climbed in. And all I could think was, what exactly was he thinking? The next morning was awkward, but not bad awkward. More like the pretending everything's normal but both of us know something changed, kind of awkward. He made us pancakes. Said nothing about the night before. I tried to match his energy, but I couldn't stop watching the way he moved around the kitchen in his boxers and worn t-shirt. His hair was a mess, and he kept humming to some song that wasn't playing, like he was trying to act totally unfazed. "You've got a good memory," I said, nodding at the perfect golden pancakes he flipped onto the plate. "What can I say?" Muscle memory. After breakfast, he asked if I wanted to go for a drive. Just kill time, get out of the house. We ended up at this old trail we used to bike as kids. Now it was overgrown, mostly used by dog walkers and the occasional jogger. Logan parked under a tree and we got out, the air thick with midsummer heat. We walked in silence for a while. Then he stopped near a clearing and turned to face me. "You ever think about how things would have been if we hadn't lost touch?" I blinked. "Yeah, sometimes." He nodded slowly, like he appreciated the honesty. Then he shoved his hands into his pockets and stared off into the trees for a moment. "I missed you, man," he said. "I didn't realize how much until you showed up." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just said, "I missed you too." He turned back to me. His jaw was tight, like he was trying to hold back a dozen things he wanted to say all at once. "I don't know what I'm doing," he said finally. "But I don't want to pretend like this is just a coincidence. You showing up now, us being here, it feels like something." I took a step closer. It wasn't brave. It wasn't planned. It just happened. So did the next thing. He didn't flinch, didn't back away. He just stood there, eyes locked on mine, until I was close enough to hear his breathing. And then, just before I could say anything else, he kissed me. The kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't a movie moment, with music swelling and fireworks in the background. It was slow, hesitant, like he was testing the air between us, waiting to see if I'd pull away. I didn't. I couldn't. My hands were shaking, and for a split second, I couldn't even breathe. Not from nerves, but from relief. From the feeling of something I'd kept buried for years, finally rising to the surface. When Logan finally pulled back, his eyes searched mine like he was bracing for a slap or some kind of backlash. But all I could do was stare at him. "That wasn't what I planned to do," he muttered, voice hoarse. "Yeah," I said, "but I'm glad you did." He let out a breath, almost like a laugh. "Jesus, man, I've been thinking about that since high school." That threw me. "What?" He looked down, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't know. I guess I buried it, ignored it. Told myself I was just close to you because you were my best friend. But then you left, and I didn't realize how much I missed you until you showed up again." I sat down on a fallen log nearby, my legs suddenly too weak to hold me up. "You're serious?" I said. He sat down next to me. "Yeah, I don't know what I am, if that's what you're wondering. I've only ever dated girls, but I've never kissed someone and had it feel like that before." We sat there for a while, not talking, just letting the moment settle between us. Eventually, Logan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Is this too weird?" he asked, not looking at me. "Like, are we about to ruin the one good thing we had?" I shook my head. though I knew he couldn't see it. "No, it's not weird. It's just a lot." He nodded, then finally looked at me again. "I'm not expecting anything. I don't even know what this means yet. I know," I said. "You don't have to explain." We drove back home in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. If anything, it felt charged. Like the air between us had changed permanently, but we weren't ready to name it yet. Back at the house, his mom was still out running errands, so we sat in the kitchen, half-heartedly eating chips out of the bag like we used to as teenagers. "Want to watch something?" Logan asked after a while. Sure. We ended up on the couch again. Same setup. This time, though, we didn't pretend we were just watching a movie. This time, we sat closer. He didn't drape his arm around me like some rom-com. He just rested his hand near mine on the cushion, close enough that I could feel the heat from his skin. Like he was giving me space, but also letting me know he was there. I turned my hand over, just enough to brush my fingers against his. He looked over at me, a small smile tugging at his mouth. That was it. That was the moment. Not the kiss, not the confession in the woods. This small, quiet connection in the half-light of a living room we'd spent our childhoods in. Later that night, as I changed into sleep clothes in the bathroom, I caught myself in the mirror. I looked different. Not because of anything physical, but because something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just staying at a friend's house anymore. I wasn't just hiding out from my problems. I was in the middle of something real, and it scared the hell out of me. Back in his room, Logan was already lying on his bed, scrolling on his phone. He looked up as I entered. "You good?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, even though my pulse was racing. I climbed into the futon, pulled the blanket up, and stared at the ceiling. We didn't say much after that, but just before I drifted off, I heard him say, softly, "I'm glad you're here." Me too, I thought. But I didn't say it out loud. Not yet. The next few days blurred together in the kind of way that makes you forget where the lines used to be. We didn't talk about the kiss again. Not directly. But things shifted. Logan started lingering longer in rooms I was in. If I went outside to read, he'd show up 5 minutes later with a drink and no book of his own. If I went to the kitchen to cook something, he'd lean against the counter asking about my favorite meals like he didn't already know from high school that I was terrible at recipes. It was all casual, easy, but underneath it was this unspoken current of something more. We weren't touching, not like before, but every now and then I'd feel him watching me. Not in a creepy way, in that quiet, slow burn kind of way that makes your chest feel tight and your thoughts spiral. On the third night, we ended up in his room again, playing some old co-op video game we hadn't touched in years. I'd forgotten how competitive he got when he was losing. "Don't throw," he warned as I fumbled a controller combo. "We're not restarting this level again." "I'm not throwing," I said, laughing. "I just forgot how to do the double jump thing." "You've always forgotten the double jump thing." We were sitting side by side on the floor, backs against his bed. Our shoulders touched occasionally as we shifted, and each time it happened, neither of us moved away. After we died, again, he tossed his controller down and leaned back with a groan. "I'm out. My thumbs hurt." I dropped mine too. "You're just mad you can't carry me anymore." "Please," he said, eyes closing. "I've been carrying your ass since we were 15. I smirked. "Emotionally, too?" He opened one eye and looked over at me. "Especially emotionally." Something about that moment. It hit deeper than it should have. The teasing was familiar, nostalgic. But now it had a weight behind it. A kind of intimacy we hadn't earned as kids but were stumbling into now. "You remember that one night junior year?" he said, sitting up again. "When you slept over and we talked until like 3 a.m. about where we'd end up?" I nodded. "Yeah. You said you were going to move to California and become a surf instructor." He laughed. "I said that?" "Yeah. You were obsessed with Point Break for like a month." "I still am," he grinned. Then his smile faded just a little. "I lied though. That night, I looked over at him. About California? No. About the girl I said I liked." He wasn't looking at me now. His fingers were picking at a fray in the carpet. "I didn't like her," he said. "I just said it so I had something to say. You were being honest, and I didn't want to look like I had nothing going on. I didn't know what to say, so I just waited. I think back then I already kind of knew," he added, "that I felt different around you." His voice was soft, tentative, and I think part of why I stopped calling you after we graduated was because I didn't know what to do with that. I swallowed hard. "Logan," he finally looked up, meeting my eyes. "I'm sorry. You don't have to be." "I do," he said. "I left one of the most important people in my life because I was scared of what I might feel." "That's not okay." We sat in silence for a while, both of us staring at the TV screen as it blinked the game over message over and over. Then, without a word, Logan reached over. His fingers brushed mine, lightly, like he was asking permission without saying it. I turned my hand over, laced our fingers together. He let out a breath, like he'd been holding it for days. We didn't kiss again that night. We didn't need to. That one simple touch said more than anything else could have. Later, when I lay on the futon, staring at the ceiling in the dark, I heard him again. Same soft voice, same hesitation. "Still glad you came?" I didn't hesitate this time. "Yeah," I said, "more than ever." The next morning, something had changed, not just between us, but in the way Logan moved around me. There was a quiet confidence to him now, like he wasn't pretending anymore. Like he'd let go of whatever part of himself had been holding back. He still didn't say much, but he didn't need to. At breakfast, he poured me coffee before I could even ask. Sat closer than usual. Smiled in that small, quiet way that meant more than any over-the-top gesture ever could. And me? I felt lighter. Like I'd been walking around with this weight on my chest and hadn't realized it until it was gone. Later that afternoon, we took a walk around the neighborhood, something we hadn't done since we were teenagers sneaking out after curfew, pretending we had the whole world figured out. Now we walked slower, side by side, occasionally bumping arms, just existing in a way that felt effortless. "You ever think about moving back here?" he asked suddenly. I glanced at him. "To this town?" He shrugged. "Yeah, it's not as boring as it used to feel. Kind of peaceful, actually." "Maybe," I said. "I don't know where I'm supposed to go next. I'm kind of in a limbo right now." He nodded, then looked over at me with something unreadable in his expression. "You don't have to figure it out alone." That stopped me. Not the words, exactly, but the way he said them. Calm, sure, like he meant every word, even if he wasn't ready to explain what he meant. When we got back to the house, the living room was empty, his mom still out somewhere, and we found ourselves standing awkwardly by the kitchen like we didn't know what to do next. "I was thinking," he said, "we could go out tonight, just the two of us." "Like, out? Out?" He laughed. "No, not like a club, just dinner, someplace quiet." It sounded so casual, but it wasn't. We both knew it wasn't. I nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that." We cleaned up, changed, and drove to this small place about 20 minutes away, a little roadside diner with a view of the lake. The kind of place locals went when they didn't want to be seen, but still wanted comfort food. The whole time, Logan was different, softer, more open. We talked about everything. Childhood stories, old memories, things we'd never said before, and when the check came, he reached for it. "I got it," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "You trying to pay for my dinner now?" He grinned. "Just trying to be a gentleman." We drove home with the windows cracked, the night air cool and heavy with the scent of trees and distant bonfires. Neither of us spoke much. The silence between us had evolved into something that didn't need to be filled. When we pulled into the driveway, the porch light flicked on automatically. He didn't get out right away. Instead, he turned off the engine and looked over at me. "I meant what I said earlier," he said, "about you not figuring things out alone." "I know." He leaned back in his seat, exhaling. "It's just, I'm still figuring myself out too. So I don't want to promise anything I can't give, but I want to try." I nodded slowly. My chest felt tight. Not in a bad way, but in that I'm standing on the edge of something big kind of way. I'm not asking for promises, I said. Just honesty. And maybe a little patience. He smiled. You've already been more patient with me than I deserve. We got out of the car and walked back inside. The house was dark, quiet. As we stood at the foot of the stairs, Logan hesitated. Then he turned toward me. I know we're taking this slow, he said, voice low. But would you maybe stay in my bed tonight? There was no pressure in his tone, just vulnerability. I nodded. Yeah, I'd like that. In his room, the air was still, the only light a faint glow from the hallway. We got under the covers, fully clothed, barely touching. But the warmth of his presence beside me, the steady rhythm of his breathing, it felt more intimate than anything else we'd shared. And just before I drifted off, I felt his fingers brush against mine under the blanket. This time, I didn't hesitate. I laced our hands together and held on. We didn't sleep much that night, not because anything happened. Not really. Just the kind of not sleeping that comes when you're lying next to someone who's kept you up in your thoughts for years. And now they're real, warm, and just inches away. I don't remember when I fell asleep. I just remember waking up with Logan's arm draped over my waist, his chest rising and falling against my back like we'd done this 100 times before. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was drifting through life. I felt grounded, still, and terrified. Because something this good, it felt like it couldn't last. That morning, we woke up slow. Logan stretched, yawned, blinked at the ceiling, then turned to face me like he couldn't quite believe I was still there. Morning, he mumbled, voice rough. Hey. His hand found mine under the blanket again. A simple touch, steady. I was afraid this was gonna feel weird, he admitted, but it doesn't. No? No, he said. It feels normal. We spent the day doing nothing. A walk. A grocery run. A lazy afternoon sprawled on the couch. He'd nudge my knee with his. I'd bump his foot with mine. We never talked about what we were doing, but we didn't have to. It was the kind of slow unfolding that doesn't need labels right away, the kind that just lets you be. That night, I sat outside on the back porch, listening to crickets and the faint hum of a lawnmower somewhere down the street. Logan came out a few minutes later, 2 beers in hand. He handed me one, then sat down beside me. You know, he said, when you first showed up here, I thought it'd be weird. Like, too much history to sort through. Was it? No, he said. It was exactly what I needed. I looked over at him. The porch light cast just enough glow to catch the edge of his jawline, the tired but content look in his eyes. You're not just saying that because you kissed me in the woods? He laughed. No, but that definitely helped. We sat in silence for a while, sipping beer, just listening to the night. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. I want to keep seeing you, I turned toward him. You mean, I don't want this to just be a fling. Or some summer thing we don't talk about once it ends. I want to figure out what this is. With you. He didn't rush the words, he just said them. Calm, clear. I felt something tighten in my chest. And then release. Yeah, I said. I want that too. He smiled, and this time, when he leaned in, the kiss wasn't hesitant. It wasn't a question. It was an answer. A quiet, solid yes. 3 months later, I was still there. We didn't rush anything. We still had our own rooms for a while, still took space when we needed it, still stumbled through awkward conversations and figuring out boundaries. But it was real. Logan didn't need to define himself overnight. He just needed someone to be real with. And that turned out to be me. Sometimes, I'd catch him watching me while I made coffee, or read on the porch, or sat cross-legged on the living room rug. And he'd smile in that soft, almost dumbfounded way like he couldn't quite believe I was still here. And honestly, sometimes I couldn't either. But I was. We were. And that was enough.